It's your boy Dr. Delta, and this is another installment of Story Time. So gather around the campfire. This story is not about cannabis whatsoever. This is actually about the story and history of the house that I lived in San Francisco for almost 10 years. The house was at 667 Los Palmos in San Francisco. It's on the backside of Mount Davidson. That's the hill that has the big concrete cross that looks down on all of Ocean Avenue and San Francisco City College. That house was rented to me by the Carpenter family. Basically, the house belonged to Florine Carpenter, whose brother-in-law, I found out later, was the Trailside Killer. I had known a little bit about the history that there was a member of the family that had some kind of CD past and was in San Quentin. I didn't know the depth of the history until one day, and I believe this was in 2015. I had a German neighbor who was always a pain in my ass. She would call the cops on us for playing music on a Bluetooth speaker on a Saturday. So definitely wasn't the friendliest neighbor, but as she got elderly and fell ill with cancer, I was always very nice to her. Her adopted son had moved in the house to help care for her, as well as some Filipino healthcare workers that were there most of the time. So one day I go out to walk my pit bulls, and I got two of them, and I can't walk them together. So I go on one walk, and I'm leaving for the first walk, and I see her coming out the front door, and she's all dressed up, and she has this like scarf thing around her neck. And I hadn't seen her in a long time, and I was like, hello, how's it going? And she pushed me off. And so I take the dog for a walk. I come back in the neighborhood. I grab the second dog, and I go do a walk around the neighborhood. When I get back, I hear a woman screaming, help. And it's the Filipino house worker, which she had sent off and the son to go grocery shopping. And she had hung herself from the security gate on the side of the house from the scarf that she was wearing. And it was directly below my daughter's bedroom. And I hear her up there. I was like, don't look down. Don't look out the window. Found out later she definitely looked out the window. And at this point, she was completely blue. There was no coming back from that. And I had to help her son cut her down and put her on the ground. One of the neighbors, there was a doctor, came in and started giving her CPR, and I felt her body. It was cold, and it had already gone into rigor mortis. So I basically went inside, and it was definitely a traumatic incident. But in the process, I got to know a couple other neighbors who had seen my front door get kicked down by SFPD and whatnot. And she's, you know why we're afraid of you? And I'm like, I don't know, no knock warrants, pit bulls. I'm a little bit urban. She's, no, you live in the serial killer house. And I was like, excuse me? She's, yeah, David Carpenter, the serial killer known as the Trailside Killer, who killed many women, probably in California, but specifically during 1968 to 1971 in the Bay Area. His brother, he used to live there with his brother and his brother's wife, Florine. I took it upon myself to do the research, and there was a book, paperback book, that was a little bit expensive to buy, and it's about him, about David Carpenter, and it's called The Sleeping Lady, which is a reference to Mount Tamalpais, a mountain that's near and dear to my heart. It's right there. My hometown is looking straight up at it, pretty much anywhere from Central Marin. And the book was called Sleeping Lady because he killed some people as well on Mount Tam. He killed in San Francisco and the greater Bay Area. At that time was the same time that they were looking for the Zodiac Killer. They actually thought both killings were the Zodiac Killer until they were able to define otherwise. And David Carpenter was taken into custody in front of the parents' house in Glen Park in 1971. So that's my story of the day. I used to live in a serial killer's house. I got raided by SFPD there. I had a 8-lighter, I think I was rocking, and a whole little like clone thing down in the basement after I lost the warehouse that I told the story yesterday about. And yeah, that's the story of the day. I used to live in a serial killer's house. The Trailside Killer, if you want to look up the book, it's called The Sleeping Lady. I think it's a little bit hard to find, but even in the book, it references the house that I lived in. My neighbor's name was Helga, and her adopted son who had moved in the house, I was talking to him a couple days later, and I was like, hey, one of the neighbors told me that David Carpenter used to live in. He was like, yeah, bro, when I was a kid, I remember waking up, and he'd already be in my kitchen eating breakfast with my mom, and she'd be giving him coffee and everything. And the last time that we ever saw him, he borrowed a couple shovels, and he never returned them. So you never know who's living next door. So anyway, every house has history. Any house over 20 years old probably has had somebody die in it. And yeah, that shit imprints there. And when I think about all the other crazy shit that happened there, There was definitely a vibe. I love the Bay Area, but it definitely has its dark, seedy underbelly. Anyway, love over everything. Love yourself. Love. All we need is love.